Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Missy Gable. In addition to being a member of the Niche Consortium, I work as the director of the UC Master Gardener program. I'm joining you guys today from Sacramento, California, and I would love to engage with you in the chat. Please let us know where you're joining from. We're just delighted that you've joined us now for the fourth webinar in our four-part series. Today, we are so pleased to be talking about plant release and marketing with two exceptional speakers. In addition to letting us know where you're joining from in the chat, I'm going to ask that we use the Q&A feature today. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a little text box with a question mark on it. Underneath of that, it says Q&A. Please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. We will address those questions at the conclusion of both of our presentations from our two speakers during a specific Q&A time. Again, we're just delighted that you've joined us today. We are going to be talking about plant release and marketing with our two speakers. Our first speaker this morning is going to be Dr. John Clark. John Clark is an international consultant in fruit breeding and a distinguished professor emeritus of horticulture. He spent his incredible 42-year career at the University of Arkansas. He has worked on crops including blackberries, grapes, blueberries, and peaches and nectarines. John has developed more than 80 varieties of various fruits and holds over 60 patents. We're so pleased to have John joining us today. We also have Katie Dubow from the Garden Media Group. Katie is the second president of the Garden Media Group. This is a women-owned and run public relations firm specializing in home and garden industry. They're celebrating more than 30 years in business. Katie is the author of the annual Garden Trends Report, and she travels the world scouting and presenting on garden trends to audiences from Italy to Chicago. We are so pleased to have both of these speakers with us today. Again, our speakers are going to be presenting, and then we'll move into a time of Q&A with our audience. So right now, it's my privilege to turn this over to John Clark.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me fine, and thanks, Missy, for that introduction. It's a joy to be with you today, and I spent over 40 years at the University of Arkansas as a plant breeder. I grew up in Mississippi on a dairy and beef cow and row crop farm, so fruit breeding was a whole new world to me, and it was a lot of fun for a long time. And also, I want to mention I'm a longtime gardener, so I have planted and tested and killed a whole array of plants, just like some of you. So today we want to talk a little bit about breeding and releasing new plants. So one thing I want to make sure, and I see you have some excellent presentations earlier from other plant breeders, and this is very brief as far as what I call classical plant breeding. I wanted you to know that we're not talking about GMOs or edited plants or anything of that nature. It's basically crossing through controlled hybridization, selecting the best plants, which we call selections, testing these towards some sort of use, potentially commercially, and then the variety of release. So when we talk about plant breeding, how's this done? And this is a very brief thing, just in case some of you didn't see the other ones. The example today is blackberries. So the picture on the left is an emasculated blackberry flower. The petals and the calyx have been removed, but most importantly, the stamens have been removed, the male parts. This was done before the flower opened. So that's an emasculated blackberry flower, and at that point, with the little pistils separated like that, it's ready to receive pollen. The right slide shows pollen being applied from the little cap of that little medicine vial. The pollen comes from the selected male parent. So you choose mothers and fathers for complementary parents, make the crosses, and so that's the basic how it all starts. It's just transferring pollen from individual plants. And systems to do this vary by species, crop, some variation within crops about how it's approached. It's a natural process. It's controlled by our mechanics of breeding. Going on just briefly with the blackberry example, the seeds are planted from there, and you've never seen a blackberry from a seed. You only see it bought in a pot or something, but that's what seedlings look like. So they come up, and we just pot up anywhere from 100 to 250, maybe 500, depending on how many we want to plant out in the field. And in my career, we planted them all outside, not in pots. Some people do this in substrate culture now. And so when you see those plants in a row, it's not very impressive, just some plants, but those are brothers and sisters from a controlled hybridization. So it just looks like plants put in the field right now. And of course, some of you see a weed or two there. So I know all about weeds. We all know about weeds, particularly those of you in the South. I'm convinced the South has more weeds than anywhere in the world. We put the plants out in the field, and you can see on the picture on the left, it's just blackberries growing. And it does look like some blackberries growing, but notice the plant in the center is flowering. None of the ones anywhere around it are. So it is what we call segregating for primocane fruiting, a unique trait that I won't go into today, but it's something that's changing the blackberry world. So that plant's different than all the brothers and sisters around it. The lower right side is the field of seedlings, and usually I would put out about 10,000 of these, and it's 5 to 7 miles a year of these plants. So I would look at them every week or 10 days for 5 to 6 weeks during the summer. So I got lots of exercise. And we talk about plant breeding as an art and a science. And the art part is to be able to walk up in the rows and spot what you're looking at, try to identify what has a use, either as a potential variety or a parent, or just something different. So very few of these plants are kept, about 0.5% of the seedlings, and then we dig up the mother plant in the case of blackberries, and we make a 20-foot plot. So I laugh and tell people, the plant breeders are largely just trash makers because most everything is thrown away because most things don't hit the target. They're no better than the parents. They're worse than the parents. But you have to find the ones that look good, and you have to know what you're looking for. So just briefly about how long does this take? Well, let's take Washita Blackberry. That's one of our more successful varieties from the University of Arkansas. The cross was made in 90, selected on a seedling field in 93. It had 2 rounds of advanced testing, 96 and 99. I released it in 2003, 13 years from the cross, a little longer maybe than sometimes necessary. Patent was filed in March 2003, issued in 2006. And very important to me, it expired in 2023. Why is that important? Well, that means royalties stop at that time. Millions of plants sold, $900,000 or a little bit more royalties collected by the University of Arkansas. And it had a huge impact on making a blackberry shipping industry in the southern United States. And there's Washita to the right, no ripe fruit, but there's lots of fruit, and it was very successful. So that's a little bit about how long this takes. So what about the garden market? All breeding programs, no matter what anybody says, they produce offspring that are off target. And I don't necessarily mean the trash. I'm speaking of things that are a little different. Let's say that they have some kind of unique color or some unique flavor or something, but they're not firm enough, or the yield doesn't look as good or something. But there might be other markets for this. And so why not consider the garden market for unique plants? I want to share a few thoughts that come upon one when they think about this. First off, nothing against plant breeders, but does the breeder know the garden market? I have to admit, I didn't know too much about the garden market early in my career. You don't think about that. It's for the commercial driving force. But I learned more later, as we'll talk about. Does the breeder have any idea how to move a product to this market? When I came up with the first, what I thought garden market variety, which I'll talk about later, I didn't know. I can't do it through the normal release mechanisms where we have nursery catalogs that promote things in not garden, but commercial fruit grower meetings. That doesn't how it works. So how would you get this product marketed and promoted? Because, if you don't promote it, it sits there. And then one minor thing, but does this offer any credit to the breeder or the employer? Like for the university, USDA, private breeding program, who gets the credit? There's always somebody looking for something, what's in it for me or the organization, because public breeders are always, they're evaluated by their accomplishments. And so another new variety, potentially has a value to the individual. And if it generates revenue, and don't kid yourself, that's a key part of university environments is generating revenue. Is there any money in it? First off, you have to think about what does it cost to protect this plant. So with patent or trademarks, a patent, plant patent is a simple patent, but it still costs $5,000 to $10,000, $15,000 to get it. And what's a royalty rate going to be? What's someone going to pay for this? There are other financial matters. Bottom line, is it worth fooling with is a key thing that programs have to look about if they're not geared up for garden markets. My first experience with this fellow to the left named Ed Fackler. Ed is from Indiana. He was a fruit grower in Indiana. He was a nurseryman, and he became the research director for Gardens Alive. And Gardens Alive has Gurney's and Fields, Michigan Bub, Brex, some other companies that are mainly mail order in their marketing. So he happened to visit me in 2005. He was there, I think, at a Southern Fruit Explorer meeting, and I was speaking about something, fruit breeding, I'm sure. And after the meeting, he said, "If you got anything interesting around here to look at," and of course, I'm always interested in people that are curious about what's going on. So Ed and I walked out to the field. There was a blueberry selection field. I showed Ed A257 blackberry. That's a selection number. It's not a name. And yes, and it had this very unique flavor, and I knew it had that. And he said, "Wow, what are you going to do with this?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to throw it away because it's too small. It's dark color. That won't work. It only has parent use, but it's the trash pile is where it's going." He said, "Well, we would pay for something like this." And I said, "Oh, no, we don't do that. That doesn't fit our model here." And that's, I just never done it. And we're always scared of anything we've never done or experienced. That's our human nature. But he said, "Wait, I'll pay for this and you're going to throw it away?" So over the next few months, I thought about that a little bit. And then Ed and I laughed years later about our famous cash for trash system to take things that potentially had no value in a commercial market, but would have value in a garden market. So that's how it came about. And here is A257 Kablooey. Now, I did not choose the name Kablooey. That right to name the plant went with the contract with Gardens Alive. So Kablooey blueberry, it's a really nice blueberry. It's still one of my favorites to eat. It's not big, it's not overly firm, but it has a flavor derived from Vaccinium atricocum that is really unique. And I would never do something like this that blows every other blueberry out of the water. A university professor, you can't do things like that, or at least you used to not be able to do it. Maybe you can now, but anyway, you can find this plant. That's the story of Kablooey blueberry, and that was the first one that exercised this ability to move to the garden market. There's one other aspect of Kablooey blueberry. It has some unique genes for flavor that I suspect other people, particularly commercial breeders, if they ever taste it, will use it as a parent. So it introduces germplasm into the commercial market also. So some other things with Gardens Alive. And there was nothing necessarily about doing business with Gardens Alive only. Ed would come to see me every year to look at things that might be interesting. And I would slap him away from things and say, "No, you can't have that, Ed. That's potentially commercial. But let's go over here and look at a sibling to that plant or something else that is very similar." So we had Black Magic, primocane fruiting thorny blackberry. And I remember that one sold quite well. Yum Yum Nectarine. That's a picture of it in the lower picture to the right. Tickle Pink Seedless Grape with a really exotic foxy flavor. That's it to the right. Very small clusters. Doesn't do for the commercial marketplace. Heaven Can Wait, Thornless Blackberry. And I thought that was an interesting name to come up with. I always wonder sometime about trademark issues, but I'm not the one that trademarked it. Captain Crunch Nectarine, or a non-melting flesh nectarine with really unique texture. And Sweet Giant Primocane Fruiting Thornless Blackberry. These are all Gardens Alive items that you can find. I believe all of them are still on the market online. Now, something else a little different that came along another time was novel blackberries. And so the lower left, and please excuse the crabgrass. I put that in there just because I bet some of you have crabgrass, but look at that plant. That's not a baby plant. That plant has very short internodes. So that's the first plant I found in 2002 that was so-called dwarf or novel in a blackberry form. Take a picture at the upper right. Now there's a plant that's not the same one, but notice the columnar growth habit. That's pretty catchy. And particularly if it doesn't get tall and gangly, would it stay in a market? In a garden better? Now, I'm not going to talk about in the lower right, but that is not Photoshop, by the way. In fact, I think when that was made, Photoshop maybe hadn't been invented, but that's an actual real blackberry in a hanging basket. This was something that derived from Arkansas genetics, marketed in the United Kingdom, called Black Cascade. That was pretty intriguing when I got the picture of that plant. That was a little more than I ever envisioned. And so, what did I do with this stuff, okay, in the United States? Well, I was very familiar and had interactions with the Brazelton family at Fall Creek Nursery in Lowell, Oregon. And they wanted to create a home garden line of plants, of fruit plants, for a special market. They're the world's largest blueberry nursery, so they thought, let's create a home garden market as an area of sales. So they invented something called Brazelberries. You can look at the pot. That's the first one of the Brazelberry varieties that I'd ever seen. And what we did is we initiated a selection and garden market. Apologize for the misspelling there. Where I would make crosses among these dwarf or novel blackberries. I'd go and select from that. Then I would send the selections to Oregon. They'd plant them out there and take a look at them and see how they did. So I selected APF 236, which is in that pot in Arkansas. It was tested in Oregon, and the decision to release it and call it Baby Cakes resulted. So Baby Cakes was one of the first products from the Brazelberry product line. Everything is business, particularly if you're in the real world and a private organization. They decided that they would sell the Brazelberry line to Star Roses. And most of you know from the Knockout Roses, and maybe some of you out there work for Star Roses, but they attained Baby Cakes and the other selections, and that's not something I had anything to do with. It just happened. Okay, so what happened next? Well, they didn't continue the Brazelberry marketing line. They went to Bushel and Berry. And so there's another picture of Baby Cakes, APF 236, plant patent 27032. That's the Canadian Plant Breeders' Rights number. All that has to be put in there, 400 chill hours. But anyway, this example I share with you is one where the plant came along. I didn't really know what to do with it, found a partner to work with testing it, and the partners were able to bring this to the market. And I had a lot of other things to do in my career, just like all of you that work at universities and, of course, real jobs. But this is something that was intriguing. Work in this area continues with my colleague and successor, Dr. Margaret Worthington, where she continues to work with these novel or dwarf plants, and there'll be other products in this area. But that's how Baby Cakes came along, and it was quite successful, way more successful than I ever envisioned. Other products, other stories. Well, I don't have time to tell you a bunch of other stories. I've always got lots of stories. When you get retired, stories are most of what you got left. But some others that exist out there. Big Daddy Blackberry with AgriStarts. AgriStarts is the propagating tissue culture nursery in Apopka, Florida. But this is sold by all sorts of marketers around the South or the whole country. Start Black Gem Blackberry, APF 205. Superlicious Blackberry. That was APF 2500, I believe. Sharon's Delight, a primocane fruiting blackberry licensed to Ozeki Nursery in Japan. Primark Freedom is actually a variety I released primarily it was the first thornless primocane fruiting blackberry ever in the world. So it's important in the commercial market, but also really popular in the garden market. So it's a crossover market, kind of like getting a song on the popular and the countryside, I guess. And then Ponca is Ponca is one of my favorite varieties, a thornless blackberry, but it's marketed and has another name by proven winners. So these are just some other stories in there. Final thoughts on garden markets. First off, there has to be a relationship between the breeder and the propagator or marketer. So somebody has to want to go out and find these plants with organizations. And we have visitors. My colleague, Dr. Worthington, has visitors from the garden market sector because they know we have some interesting things here. And so you have to work together to figure out what makes any sense. And so, but not everyone wants to venture into more meetings, more conversations, more visitors more complexities, more intellectual property rights discussions, more contracts, more patents. Everybody enjoys money coming in, best I can tell, as long as there's enough of it and you can pay the bills. And a key part of this is identifying traits of potential market use. And you have to disregard some of the commercial requirements. For instance, like firmness of fruits. It needs to be reasonably firm, but you're going to pick it in your garden and then you may eat it when you're standing there, or at least within a few days. You don't have to worry about it being able to put on a ship for 30 days from Peru, like our current blueberry varieties that you're buying in your stores right now. That's the trip they've taken. Some of them are really great, but they were bred to ride a long way, not necessarily in your backyard. So that's where master gardeners, I think, can help, because you can say these are things that would be really great to have in a garden product, because everything is driven by market demands. And it seems to me that those of you out there that are really using the plants could really enjoy something like that. I remember years ago, I incorporated a maple leaf shape in a muscadine grape. And this originated at the University of Florida, and I worked with it quite a bit. And having maple leaves rather than the standard muscadine leaves, I thought was really, really attractive. I took a garden market person by that one day, and they said, no, that's not going to be important. Nobody would care about that. So, of course, I didn't get in an argument because I didn't want to spend time on that. But that was someone said, no, that's not anything noteworthy because it's a limited market and those leaf shapes not going to do anything. I still think that's a unique product that could be brought back around, particularly for espaliers and other designs. So you have to have a pathway to commercialization has to be developed. And that's with the marketer, promoter, and how to make it work. And then you have to make it win-win. So can you be enthused as a plant breeder that you have another product that has been used in the marketplace? And that always feels good to see that and put smiles on people's faces. And can whoever's fooling with it, can they market it? Can they show a profit? And it can be ultimately doing some good. So the garden market, 40 years ago, didn't think a lot about it. Years later, it's really been an area that I enjoyed working in. I felt like it was worth fooling with. It put a few smiles on some faces. And when you get down to it, smiles on faces, that's probably what we're all after. I appreciate your attention, and I hope some of this is worthwhile to you. I enjoyed being with you.
John, thank you so much. It was incredible to hear some of your stories and gain a little bit of insight into the incredible experiences that you've had. I think I'm certainly blown away by all of the different plant releases that you have been a part of. And I have to say, I have a new aspirational goal in my life. I have written down in my notes, become trash maker / fruit explorer. I have a feeling that probably resonates with others. Your experience is absolutely incredible, and we appreciate you sharing it with us today. We're so pleased now. We're going to follow up John's incredible presentation with Katie Dubow. Katie, I'm going to advance to the next slide, and then you should be able to take over from there.
Sounds good. And oh my God, so full circle, John. We worked with the Brazeltons and we helped launch Brazelberries to market. And then Star Roses, being a client of Garden Media Group, when they bought Bushel and Berry, it was a moment for us also of helping them bring that plant to market. So really, really fun, full circle. I didn't know I was in Berry Royalties present. So now I know. That was a great presentation, and it's always so interesting to me to learn how long it takes plants to come to market. I saw a question. I know we'll get to them at the end, but we also helped launch Star Roses Knockout Rose. That's kind of what put Garden Media Group on the market. The company was started by my mom 37 years ago, and we helped launch Knockout. But what I learned recently was that Knockout actually the breeding started in the 80s. So plants take a long time to come to market, and it was launched in 2000. So plants take a long time to come to market. That is not my expertise. I like them once they are ready to go and have stuff on the shelves. So let's jump in. What I am going to be talking about, just to the point, is once they are on the shelves. I loved hearing about the needs of what John talked about, but my expertise is once that plant leaves the greenhouse, we enter this whole new world of perception, of storytelling, of emotion. And what we really think one of the important things, the plant needs to be good, right? But we always start with kind of a expectation that the plants in a garden center, when you walk in, are quality plants. Yes, the person that you're speaking to and giving advice to might be looking for native plants. They might be looking for edibles, but we're kind of all starting with the same assumption that the plants are good. And then what does it take to get that plant to be sold? Why is that one sold over the others? And to us, it's a great story. It's what inspires someone to grow rather than just saying, I need this, like I have to have this. So we're going to run through today some different strategies, some different audiences to how we turn some people to say, into that, maybe into the yes of the sale. But first, we're going to jump into really quick. I'm going to move fast because I know we have 20 minutes. I just want to give you a little baseline of where we are in the market as it relates to plants and people. So 5 years ago, you all know what I'm talking about, the big C word, COVID. So something powerful took root. This is where we were before the pandemic. We use a tool called Sprout Social, and it does our listening, our social media listening, and it scours the internet. And so we have a tool that we have been in place listening to conversations online since before the pandemic. So this is where the posts were in February and March, posts about plants. So when people talked about, and we remove things like Olive Garden. So this is literally when people are talking about plants. What are they talking about? So you saw it jumped big time from, more than doubled here. But then this is what it looks like the following year. You can see that posts about plants the following year was enormous. So the chatter, the interest, the conversations just exploded. Oh, let me go one more slide. It is a little slower, but I got it, Missy. When we're looking at what social platforms they were talking on, TikTok saw 150% increase in gardening content, and it has maintained itself as one of the top platforms. Tweets and posts grew over 139%, and gardening YouTube has maintained its place as the top place. But as incredibly as the world moved forward, so we now step forward, flash 4 years, the boom has stayed strong. The chatter is still incredibly up on social media. You can see just this year what we're talking about. Reddit, the chatter year over year is up 59%. This is where a number of young people are going to get their information about plants. And a lot of it is crowdsourced. So this would be one really interesting place if you are trying to communicate about plants or see what people in your area are talking about. Reddit is absolutely exploding for that. Twitter is also, or X, is also up 67%. There are lots of people who have left the platform, but it is still a major place for chatter about gardening. But YouTube is the major story. We have seen some of the platforms decline, like Instagram or Meta platforms, but I do think I'll say the caveat that they've changed how our listening tools can monitor them. So you can't see stories. If you're familiar with Instagram, it's those little bubbles at the top. We can't see the stories. We can't hear, the listening tool in the story. So I don't believe that the chatter is actually down. It's just shifted in the way that people communicate. They're not sharing in their static posts anymore. They're sharing in their stories, but we don't have that data to back it up. So I'm not going to put that in writing. You just heard it from me. But YouTube is the big story here. This is where people are getting the most bang for their buck as far as gardening conversations. And interestingly enough, AI is pulling from YouTube big time over all the other social media platforms. So we as an industry now have what everybody wants. We have new people who have come in, new types of demographics, and a growing consumer, sustained now over 5 years consumer base. But, and here's some information if you're not familiar with the National Gardening Survey. The National Gardening Association does a survey every year. And so these are some of the interesting things that they said about the current situation of consumers. So that's a survey that came out this July, and it interviews people their behaviors the previous year. So this is what every industry wants to have: young people who are spending money in their industry. But you're saying, wait, I thought we were talking about marketing. Why are we looking at social media, and what can this tell us? Well, to me, data is everything. It's really important to know why certain, baby cakes versus some of the other berries are performing. It tells us what people are curious about, what their intent is, how they own that particular comment or that category, and what language they are using to talk about it. And so if we are going to be marketing to different segments of the population, we need to understand how they talk. So that way, when we do show them images and graphics and pictures and communicate in words, they can see themselves within our products. And that's the most important thing, is that we create a lifestyle, a gardening lifestyle, in which these current customers and these new customers can see themselves in it, right? That's the most important thing. And this is why marketing matters, because we're growing as an industry continually every single year. And so that's really exciting. So the next couple of slides, we're going to cover these three things. Let's talk a little bit about who we are marketing to, and back to those generational differences. Like, does it really matter if we use slang terminology that resonates more with a younger audience to boomers? Does that matter, or do we need to speak across multiple generations? And then finally, how important is it to position our products for success? You can guess that I think it's very, very important. Let's jump into the basics. Let's start with who buys and what are they buying. So when breeders are looking at plants, they are kind of looking at different segments. I think, I'm not a breeder, but who are we breeding this plant for? John even said it. We're not breeding are we breeding a blueberry so it can travel? Did you say, I don't even know how many days, 30 days? I can't even remember. There was a 3 in there. An obscene amount of time from when it is picked to our plates. So are we breeding for that? That is an important segment of the population. Are we breeding for backyard growers or landscapers? So it is really important to understand who our message or our product is resonating with. So in our case, we're thinking of 3. We think when we're talking about products, like when we got Brazelberries and we started working with the Brazeltons, who is our audience here? And in this case, we were looking at beginner gardeners, number 1, these home gardeners who wanted ease and beauty. One of the major points about the Brazelberry was that people couldn't pronounce it. They called it Brazelberries. But number 2 was that they wanted something easy. So they wanted the payout of the berry. They wanted to be easy, but they also wanted to be beautiful. So we marketed these as shrubs, beautiful shrubs that happen to have fruit, because the beauty and the ease of having something in their garden was a bigger selling point. This home gardener, especially the beginner gardener, is looking for something that works. Now, this segment of the population is not necessarily looking for something new. So when we market to these beginner gardeners, it's our job to really hammer home the message of, you can do this. Like, how are the different ways that we can talk about the easy nature of having this plant? Because success, the number one reason, you can all say it out loud in your desks, why people don't garden is because they believe they're going to kill a plant. And the number one reason how they kill that plant is probably water. But it's the number one reason why people don't garden is because they think they have a brown thumb. And so it is our job for this beginner gardener to give them that confidence. Think back to knockout roses. That is the whole premise. And as you well know, knockouts completely revitalized the rose industry because roses had a reputation of being fussy. Along came knockout with that message of knocking out the competition, knockout blooms, whatever a beautiful knockout. And it revitalized the rose industry. And that was really the message. No green thumb required. Literally, these will grow in a mall median strip, and they'll grow just as beautifully in your backyard. The second audience is you all. So I want to say plant collectors, but what really here we're looking at is somebody who is a more advanced gardener. So in this case, they are looking for more what's new. You already have an established garden. So something that is limited, something that is exclusive. I mean, that's rare. So these are the customers that aren't just going to go for easy because they have the chops. They understand that they can grow plants. So they're not looking for that. They're looking for something unusual. There's a lot of these customers or gardeners who are also online. And so they're showing up on social media, talking about their rare plants, talking about their scores, talking about where they got plants. And in some cases, people will drive. I talked to a woman at a native plant conference, let's say in the summer, so a couple of weeks ago, but whew, time flies this summer. And she told me she drives from Pennsylvania to Maryland to get her plant. So they are willing to travel. So the messaging here is not about what's new. It's more about the origin and how that plant connects to their personal story about their garden. And then finally, it's the professional. And so in the case of Brazelberries, we were not really interested in the collectors. We were really interested in the first and the third segment here. We also thought that this plant would be really attractive to designers because now you can get a plant that is semi-evergreen, put it in your landscape. It will be beautiful, great habit, but also produce fruit. And so we thought landscape designers would like it too. But what was our messaging for them? Certainly not easy. We wanted something that was a consistent performer. We wanted something that they could put in at scale. We wanted value. So what were the things that the communication to landscape outlets and publications versus consumer outlets and publications? So for example, Greenhouse Grower or Lawn and Landscape Magazine are our trade publications, whereas the consumer ones, you all know, pick your region. I saw we're from all over the country, which is cool, but Better Homes and Gardens, Southern Living, Sunset. So those are still really wildly popular. The print magazines, maybe not, but the digital issues are still get millions and millions of views every single day. And that's why brands for the professionals, some of our clients are like the Encore Azalea, back to Star Roses, are really well known with designers because they are tried and true and trusted brands. They represent reliability for this audience of designers who is looking for something for their clients who they know is going to perform. So next step, let's layer in generation. So I listed 4 here. And of course, some of these audiences overlap. I think it's important to know that there is going to be, first of all, millennials' ages are a little wonky. They don't know if it's from 80 to 2000, 82 to 2002. So whoever they are, we do have some overlap in these. And I don't always love defining people by their age. In fact, sometimes I really recommend to our clients to define people by their gardening level. It doesn't matter if you are 70 or 30. If you have never grown anything before, you fall into the beginner category, and we need to talk to you and give you the confidence of this is an easy care plant. So that's really important. We need to first identify these people by where they fall on the scale of how well they garden, because that's going to be the biggest thing for marketing to people. But the next thing is certainly what their perspectives are. Boomers are definitely motivated by nostalgia, but I'll add the caveat is that this Gen Z generation is also really, really tapped into nostalgia as well. The record player is making a comeback. I was at an event last week and 4 digital cameras were in attendance. By digital, I mean like disposable, not digital, disposable cameras were there. I mean, 4 of them. So and the people were in their 20s. So this is definitely something that nostalgia that Gen Z is having for an era that they didn't even partake in. So it's fascinating. And so boomers, for example, when Jane Goodall just sadly passed away, Jackson and Perkins Roses is a client of ours. And so there's a Jackson and Perkins rose. And I pitched that out, and it was a very successful story about not just a rose that, harkens you back to a story that maybe you have about Jane Goodall, but also has a donation component. So it is a feel-good story about beauty that also gives back. So that was a great story that resonated a lot with boomers. When we're looking at Gen Z, we're looking at practicality and low maintenance. And Gen Z often gets overlooked in a lot of they're the smallest generation of these four, but in a lot of recaps. But right now, they are the busiest because they're juggling careers, taking care of their parents, still taking care of their millennial, often children who live at home. So for them, it's about beauty. Yes, it needs to be easy, but it also needs to do double duty for me. So drought tolerant is a really big message this year. It was in our trends report, which is a report that you can find on our website, Garden Media Group. We make one every year. This is our 25th year we've done a trends report. But this year, more than ever, I think those of you who I saw from North Carolina, we were devastated last year by natural disasters, but worse than I feel like the years past. And our customers, why would they replace their landscapes with the same things that got ruined by the floods? So they're looking for things that are going to be smarter for them in their landscapes. And so we really need to think about that, but also the set it and forget it. Once you plant this, you'll be good. Millennials, they are the why generation. So they want to know how this is good for them, how this is good for their community, and how this is good for their planet. They crave authenticity, sustainability, and wellness. So those are the three really big things that are important to them. We work with Costa Farms, and we have a campaign that's called the Green Reset. And you just hit that green reset button and you fill your house with indoor tropical plants, and it instantly makes you feel good. And I think part of the surge in houseplants in the last 5 years has really been focused or because of this generation in particular. Gen Z, on the other hand, is all about personality. They are also authentic. They're kind of interested in all the things that the generations before them are also interested in, but they're visual storytellers. They are recording their lives online and they're sharing it with them, and they want to do the same thing with their plants. It's part of who they are, part of their self-expression, and they want real plants. We saw a little blip there right before the pandemic of faux greenery indoors, but thankfully the pandemic just cut that off. And this generation in particular wants real plants. So the through line, though, with all of these generations is that people aren't just buying plants. So they are buying a story. They're buying something that makes them feel. So is it making them feel nostalgic? Is it making them feel like they're keeping up with the Joneses, making them feel like that it's good for their mental health? Whatever it is, it's a story that we're creating around these plants, not what zone it is, not how big it grows. All of that stuff is important for sure. But the first thing that's going to make someone choose a plant is that how it makes them feel. So that's a really important part of this. Okay, so where do we go from here? This next phase is about connection, not just ownership, but belonging. What we're seeing is three big shifts happening. We're seeing social storytelling, where plants are content. Like, people are taking pictures of their plants, at least the people in my feeds, but they're sharing content like it's a selfie. We are looking at wellness as a connection. So people are looking to gardening as therapy. So when we're marketing our plants, we're thinking about how they are making people feel good. And you really need, I'm really into trends. And so I believe that we need to understand and follow these cultural shifts so we can stay relevant to the people we are communicating to. So if wellness is hot today, yes, I'm telling you it is, but what about 3 years from now? So staying on top of those things is going to really help you not just sell more plants, but grow more gardeners. And that's what we're really into. So this last section, we're going to talk about marketing and where you need to be. So I know this is one of the biggest questions that we get, which is, okay, TikTok, Facebook, email, like, what are the others? YouTube. Like, where do I start? Where do I begin? So let me give you permission to not be everywhere. You cannot be everything to everyone. If you are trying to communicate to plants, if you're trying to tell people, teach people in a region, you do not need to be everywhere. That is okay. What you need to do is you need to pick this Venn diagram. I love Venn diagrams. Your Venn diagram. So first, we need to look at what is important to you. Where do your skills lie that's going to make you stand out amongst the people that you're talking to? So what can you speak confidently about? That's really important. And, that's the thing that includes even social media expertise. But mostly here, what we're talking about is plant expertise. Figure out if you even want to grab a piece of paper and draw these Venn diagrams and list some of your skills and expertises here. That would be really helpful. The next thing is, hit forward, is your dream audience. So that's going to be, who are you trying to touch? Who are you trying to reach? If you are an extension, I know most of you are Master Gardeners in extension. Are you doing events in your community? Are you teaching children in elementary school? I love it if you are. Reach out to me. I'm starting a environmental club here for my kids are in 3rd and 6th grade. So I could use all the advice that I could get. But you need to look and see who your dream audience is, and then find out what platforms they're on. If you think that your main core audience that you talk to are boomers, then they're on Facebook. But if you think it's Gen X, they're on TikTok. So these are the platforms that you're going to need to be on. And then finally, you need to figure out what are they looking for from you? What are their anxieties, goals, and daydreams? But what are these customers looking for from you? Are they looking for confidence? Are they looking for practical advice? Are they looking for designs? Whatever it is, fill it in this little bubble. And, that's the next one. Yes, here we go. Fill it in this little bubble. And then finally, what you're going to have is what is your best content. So when you're thinking about webinars that you want to produce, e-newsletters that you want to put out, social media posts that you're going to be doing for your local extension or your Master Gardener group, this is the sweet spot. That's the sweet spot for content, but also where you're going to be posting that, like which platform you're going to be posting that. And believe me, I'll repeat it again because it's so important. It is not imperative for you to be on every single platform. I give you that permission. So for example, if we don't have any garden centers here, and you're really good at videos, your audience is Gen X homeowners with yards. They're on Pinterest. By the way, y'all, Pinterest is growing like crazy right now. They have agreed to prioritize real content and real videos over AI generated, and it has made them soar with the younger customer. Right now, Pinterest is really exploding. I do predict that the other platforms are going to follow suit, but right now, Pinterest is really leading the way. So this is your customer, and these are the things that you should create for them. Here are, as we already talked about, the top social platforms for gardening right now is YouTube. Not only is the top social platform for everyone to get information from, but it is one of the top 3 ways that AI is getting content to recommend to people. So one of those is content that's on the internet, right? Just out there on the internet. The second way is reviews that are being posted, it's pulling from, and then YouTube. YouTube takes up the greater share of all the other social media channels combined, which is crazy. So here we talk a little bit about how people are finding our words in 2026. So here are just a couple of best practices to use when communicating online or when trying to market your plants. You might have heard that hashtags are dead. A lot of people I've noticed on Instagram have not heard this, but the hashtag doesn't do anything for you anymore. So when you are posting, it looks a little bit like you don't understand the way that social media works because they are pulling all your keywords that are in the post. AI is scanning the photo to find what keywords this photo associates with. So you do not need to use hashtags anymore. If you feel the inclination to use a hashtag, put that as part of your caption. So that's going to help you on Instagram and Facebook. However, if you're on TikTok, that's a totally separate company. So they are, for now, so they're still using hashtags as a way for people to find content. If you are posting video on YouTube, I told you that YouTube is the best way that AI is crawling. That's one of the top 3 ways that AI is crawling your sites. But they're not doing it if you're not closed captioning your content. So you need to be making sure that when you're finished your video, just hit closed caption. You don't need to have them show up on the video. In fact, that's the user's choice, but that helps AI know what's actually the content that's in your videos. And then we are talking about linking. This means if you do have blogs, are you linking back to your social media channels and vice versa, and pins? How are you keeping your audience flowing in and out of all of your content? Because people are ready to shop. We are not really here to sell anything except for gardening. So we don't need to worry about posting products necessarily, but what you are trying to do is keep that customer educated throughout all of your social media content or your marketing content, because we know that AI hallucinates, and we want to make sure that where people are getting their information from is accurate. That's the most important thing that all the people on this call can provide is accurate, up to date, because you're staying relevant and current information to the people who need it the most. So in conclusion, don't underestimate the power of being authentic and real. You're not trying to be anybody that you're not online. You can see here some really successful pieces of content that are out there in the world. Trader Joe's still has a print on newspaper flyer that is it's 3 times more popular than any of their competitors. Be yourself. This Bates Garden Center, this isn't fancy. There is nothing, no videos in here, but it is a top performing piece of content. So just be yourself and people will resonate and respond. So 2 big ideas to recap. We are popular. Gardening is booming. People want to hear from us. And so there is an audience coming to us and bringing trends. And we really need to pay attention to what those trends are, both on social media and in the real world, in order to respond to them. And number 2, like I said, I know it can be stressful to figure out how to market yourself online, but figure out that Venn diagram of success and play in that space, because you will grow when you focus on how to communicate the most important messages that you have. So thank you very much. You have my contact information down here. Hey, please do get in touch with me. I know we have some time for questions here, but I am available for questions at any time.
Katie, thank you. That was absolutely spectacular. When we think about the importance of trends and like you were talking about social storytelling, that really resonated with me in the Extension Master Gardener program, because we have a shared common goal. We're out there trying to grow gardeners as well. People who are engaging in green and growing spaces for better well-being, for greater success. Whether they're, planting for aesthetics or they're planting for food production. I thank you so much for sharing your insight with us. Really, really resonated with our Extension Master Gardener community. And now for both of our speakers, we have an opportunity to move over to a question and answer time. 2 of our niche colleagues, Pam Bennett and Natalie Baumgartner, are going to be facilitating that Q&A for us. And so we'll turn it over to them. If folks still have questions and you haven't put it in the Q&A yet, please go ahead and take the time to do that. That Q&A button is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll turn it over to Pam and Natalie now.
All right. That was awesome. I want you to know that our facilitator team is geeking out. We've all got our own questions in addition to the excellent questions that are in the Q&A. So I will kick us off. And this is a question that I love. It's going to go for John. And I work a lot in vegetables and fruit. And the thing that we hear the most from folks is flavor. Like, I want more flavor. And so the question is about sweetness and flavor in berries. And I think maybe you might want to hit it in a 2-part way. I know you've worked a lot on the genetic side of really breeding for flavor. And our questioner, Aurora, who happens to be from about 20 minutes north of me in Tennessee, also asked some questions about kind of the environmental impact and what we've seen with some of our recent weather conditions impacting berry flavor.
Flavor is always a big deal. And of course, you as gardeners, you really hold the maximum potential flavor in your hands because you can let the fruit mature. So that's the number one thing. And that's really great that you can do that. Flavor is elusive. Flavor is a complex trait. It has lots of different genes that affect flavor because you got tartness and sweetness and aromatic. Sometimes you have bitterness, sometimes you have astringency. And then you have environmental effects that are tremendous. So it is really complicated to do that. In my career with blackberry breeding, for instance, the number one thing really that's different on blackberries in the marketplace right now is reduced acidity. They used to be something that people only made jams or jellies or pies or cobblers or whatever. So great strides have been made simply by reducing acidity. So anytime you have talk about flavor, it's tricky. What's available genetically, what can be achieved, how sweet can it be, or how whatever can it be? And then the next thing is every mouth is its own evaluator. So how do you get something that everybody likes? I have these traditional thoughts that I've learned over the years that like Northern European derived people tend to like tartar fruit, and many other groups of people. I grew up in the southern U.S., Northern European derived ethnicity, but I prefer sweet. But, that's where Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper came from the South, and other stuff and sweet tea. So it all depends on kind of what people like. So it's a complex thing. And you can rest assured all breeders are trying to create something that tastes good. But just think about, just the other day, I was spending time with a fella that developed the blueberries I had for lunch. They were Family Tree Farm brand blueberries grown in Peru. The variety was developed in northern New South Wales, Australia. And he's a friend of mine, and I was down there visiting him. And it's hard to believe that long trail of genetics, not to mention getting something, all the business parts of that, grow it in Peru, haul it up here. It's probably been 30 or 40 days. And it was a fabulous product. Okay. So we're always trying to achieve something that tastes good and is durable. So I don't know if I answered your question. I talked in circles for a few minutes about the topic. We all want it, but sometimes it's tricky to get. Lastly, the environment. If you have cloudy days and temperatures that are not great, particularly for blackberries, they all taste bad. Okay. So that's one of the tricky things. There's a lot of bad blackberries. Most peaches are good to okay. So depends on the crop, depends on the person, depends on the environment.
Okay. Question for Katie. Katie, couple questions. First of all, it's great to see you. So glad to have your enthusiasm and experience. Is that a live plant wall in the background or is that fake?
It is live.
It better be. Nice. Beautiful.
And I made it.
Did you really? Well, we may have to stay on later and find out how you did it. Question from Tom Byrne. Are there any Extension Master Gardener organizations that are good at social media? Their helpline is staffed with amazing home gardening talent, all for free, but with little outreach, few folks know about it. So help us.
Are there any that are good? Yes. So I just quickly was going to my Instagram to see who I follow. And I'll post a couple of them in the chat here so we can all follow each other. Number one, I think we should all be following each other. So if you do have an Instagram for your local master gardeners, you should also, I would suggest popping it here in the chat so we can follow each other, because I think you learn a lot from what other people are doing. It's not copying, it's flattery that we would imitate something that you do. So I think that would be really great. I think Colorado's doing a great job. If you look at some of their reels, they're on trend. Some of them have like 5,000 views. So they're funny. It takes a lot of work. I understand that it takes a lot of work to do reels, but I think that's one. Another one that I like is University of California. Let me post them here because there's some consistency in their imagery. So when we're looking at the feed, if you're looking at the entire feed, like if you just clicked on those, you'll see that Colorado is a little bit like chaotic. I mean, it's like there's a lot of different fonts and colors. And if there's anyone on here from Colorado, you're doing great. But that would be my suggestion. So when you look at University of California, there's a little bit more consistency and harmony in those I'm looking specifically at the reels, but in the reel fonts, in the covers that they choose for their reels. So you are not just telling a story about the individual plants, but you're telling a story of your page. Like, what does your page want to convey? If you want to convey chaos, great, go for it. But if you're trying to convey a little bit more of an educational tone, a humorous tone, some of the Colorado, they have like Sherlock Holmes hats on. So you see that that's humorous. And I only see one other person who's posted. So I'll keep going. One of Wisconsin's YouTube page, I also think is really good. I see it hasn't been updated in a while, but I do like, it's beautiful. It's a variety of different types of content. So was that the question, was like, just which ones do I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which ones are really good? Thank you. That's great, Katie. Appreciate it.
All right. So, John, I'll throw you another BlackBerry question. And you mentioned Ouachita took about 13 years from the cross to release. And our questioner, Susan, is asking, is that pretty similar? Like, was that about how long Baby Cakes and some of those that are now in the garden market took? Or was that longer, shorter? What's kind of been your average?
Well, I think the quickest you could probably take a blackberry or something of that, maybe a strawberry, would be like 8 or 9 years from cross. That's when you do that hybridization until you could say, put it on the market. The trick to all of this is the faster you move, the bigger the chance you make a big mistake. Now, obviously, in the garden market, if you plant something, it doesn't work, gardener, me included, is like, well, I probably did something wrong. And I supposedly know, as a trained horticulturist, how to grow things. Most people think, well, I just did the wrong thing. But the faster you move with anything, the more chance that you won't uncover a problem, a disease susceptibility, or it's not winter hardy, or not heat tolerant, or something like that. So generally, I would say 8 to 9 years on some of the quicker fruits. If you're breeding pecans, probably 20 or 25 years. And you have to be really young and wise and disciplined to do something like that. Baby Cakes was shorter. I don't have that timeline right off the top of my mind. One thing, Baby Cakes moved through can we get this plant to something useful for gardeners? And we didn't get off into how many pounds per acre it made. It was like, does the plant produce fruit a reasonable amount? It was really more like, this is a unique architecture. We wanted to see how the architecture was maintained, more so than worrying about, the yield, although we want it to yield, of course, or whether the fruit is that firm. So it varies a lot. And but again, if you have a product and you don't have anybody to take it to market, you still got it. That can be said for about anything we create.
Yep. Thank you. And just a couple of comments. Katie answered the question about slides. If you look up at the top of the question and answer, there's open, answered, and dismissed. So if you want to know her answer, she said Canva, and Canva is pretty user-friendly. Yeah, thanks, Katie. So I have a two-part question. First part's for John, and second part's for Katie. So in terms of bringing a plant to market and the process, trademarking, patenting, can you address that piece of it? And then, Katie, at what point do they tend to come to you? Do they come to you for naming? And when it comes to trademarks and patents, how do you handle that whole mishmash?
Well, I'll comment first. When we talk about patents and when we're talking about clonally propagated plants, we're talking about plant patents. There are 3 types of patents that exist out there. Plant patents are one specifically. They have one claim, and that's the variety, and that restricts the propagation of the plant if you hold the rights of the patent holder. So that's fairly simple. It takes anywhere from a year to a year and a half, depending on how fast the process goes. It's a fairly simple process. How much does it cost? That's always a big factor, because if you're going to spend $10,000 patenting something, you're already down $10,000, not to mention what it costs to develop the thing, which could be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. As far as trademarks, and when we back up, and Katie, I'm sure you'll get off of this, a patent is good for 20 years from the date of filing. So you got 20 years. So you have to have that on your mind if you're the inventor, to get that thing out there and not waste a lot of time. 20 years seemed like a long time when I was 20 or 30 years old. 20 years is about 30 or 45 minutes now at 60. And then a trademark, what's different about that, of course, it gives an identity to the product. A trademark does not expire as long as it's maintained and the fees paid and it's used in trade. And it gives that perpetual recognition. So it actually lasts longer. And so most in the garden market, I think, would look for trademarks would be what you would be something catchy. The patent name is often something, dull, like APF 236. Who could market that?
Katie could.
But we weren't going to call it APF 236. That was just the patent name. We didn't want it to be appealing or whatever, probably. But anyway, Katie, you can address the other aspects.
Well, it is interesting because I don't know if you all are familiar with Roseanne geranium. That was patented for 20 years. And I know a lot of people who were really excited when the patent fell off of that one. And so it's interesting how it works. You're right, John. 20 years is not long enough anymore. But people come to us at all different stages. For example, Knockout or Star Roses came to us before they had a name. And so my mom, Susie McCoy, helped name the Knockout Rose, which is really a neat part of her legacy. So there is part of that, but it is harder and harder nowadays because of all of the other plants that are already trademarked or patented. So coming up with a name gets harder and harder because not only do you have to figure out a creative name, then you have to run it through the process to see whether someone else has already patented it or a part of the name or something else. So it's a really long and arduous process. But, I know a lot of people said it'd be so fun to name nail polish colors. Like, ugh, no. Now that I know how the sausage is made, just give it to us once you have it ready. And really, the best time for us to start marketing a plant is when it is widely distributed, because it is great to have a limited number. There were 10,000 knockouts for the first 3 years. And of course, we sold out of all of them. But demand is good. Demand and supply is a tough balance, but you certainly don't want to be marketing this out to 1,000 people and only have one person be able to get it. That's a lot of disgruntled customers. So the time is right for us to get a plant when there's a good amount of inventory and it is widely enough distributed that when it does hit Better Homes and Gardens, somebody in California and Florida can both get their hands on it.
One other comment I would make on this is that from a plant breeding standpoint, if you're doing your job, you're always creating new products. I always like to look at this as like, well, let's move this out there. Hopefully it will do some good. Like when I created developed the first primocane fruiting blackberry. I won't get into what that is. Big deal in the blackberry world. Some of you would snicker at that. Primark was the trademark given for that series of plants. But it was the first one for kind of get the foot in the door, so to speak, that this is a new type of plant. And as a plant breeder, you're always creating new products. So genetic variation usually is there to create new things, but you do have to think about what's our next step subsequent to this. And so as long as you have variation within traits to make something a different color or different flavor, different shape, different something, you can keep on going with that. So that's the fun part of the breeding side. And I'm sure it's equally as fun on the marketing side.
Thank you.
All right. So I have a question. This is coming from Tom in New Jersey. And I think this is probably primarily for you, John. In when you think about the breeding work that you've done, of course, the trialing is integral with that. Do you think that there's a role for volunteers in that trialing world, either pre-release or maybe post-release, when you think about the educational capacity? Like, have you ever worked with volunteers on any of those, or do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I really don't have a lot of experience. So you're thinking more along working with master gardener educators and such?
Right. Yeah. Say trial plots at our, offices or nearby research and education centers. And
in my career, of course, I was around before master gardener program started. And I thought, what a fabulous thing when it came along. And I spent a lot of time speaking at them over the years and all sorts of stuff. But really didn't have a lot of direct, okay, what would you like as a gardener, so to speak? As we've developed, those of you that work in the public sector in master gardener programming, one thing to do, I think, is sometime maybe inquire with plant breeders about, do you have any things that might be of interest? Because you may have an idea about something that someone else doesn't realize that might be of value. It's always time is a premium, and that's something else. So I probably would have valued somebody coming out with me and let's walk around and look at some stuff and see if you think this would be interesting or not. But I could have also said, I've only got 15 hours of sunlight today, so I sure don't have time to fool with any more visitors or whatever sometimes. So input on that. But, it would be an interesting thing because, we'd like to get products used as plant breeders. And so there's probably more that can be done with that sort of thing. I'm not in the business anymore, so to speak. But the other side is if you're a university breeder, your time is really tied up hustling for money all the time. And, you've got classes and you got committee meetings, and it's really tough. So I don't have a good answer, but I think it's worth something. It's worth, particularly you Master Gardener coordinators for states, to, maybe inquire with the breeders within your universities of like, is there an avenue to discuss this? It's a little bit of a novel idea to me.
All right. Cool. I mean, I think we've all got it on our list right now.
Yeah. Katie, Melanie Jones wants to know, in the research of generations, do you find that most people are growing their own food or ornamentals?
All that. And that was a great question. And I wish that I could have a concise answer because it's all different for all generations. And then, of course, different on whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced gardener. But we are seeing a lot of interest in the younger generations growing flowers. I know. Are you surprised? Did you think I was going to say food? The National Gardening Survey of last year saw a huge increase, especially starting with the beginning of the pandemic, of people growing more flowers, and they were growing them, to create these outdoor offices and pools. The people who increased all of their hardscaping outside over the pandemic. So the last couple of years, we've seen a big increase in people growing more ornamentals. But edibles are still very interesting for younger generations. So you definitely have younger generations interested in growing edibles always.
Natalie, if I could cut in here, I have one question too. And I'm really excited to have both of you on here because you're talking about plants that as I'm coming up through my career. Are you talking to your kids, Katie?
Sorry, come here. I have a bunch of people here, but I just have a little Halloween costume trial here. We've got a little cat. Just wanted to say hi. All right. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. We watch her grow up on Instagram. So, you guys have been in the industry for a while. Katie, not as long as I have, but I've heard the names, knockout roses, the brazelberries. I mean, all these exciting things. So to have you guys here is really powerful. Do you know, or can you think of any market failure, something that lots of time was spent on breeding, lots of time was put into it, gets out on the market, and then boom, it's a bust?
So you're asking about failures? That was the question? Well,
yeah.
You always kind of like to close your ears when things like that come along. And of course, failures occur. From a breeder standpoint, I'm impressed, I think, over my career, how little I heard of big failures. Nurseries or the provider or seller of the plant often hears of the failure because that's when somebody comes back and says, I want a replacement, or, this is damaged.
Mm-hmm.
And as a breeder, particularly in a public sector, you didn't have that interaction so much. Now, of course, you pick up things along the line that say, well, this has kind of got this problem or whatever, or got this problem and I didn't spot this and it's kind of troubling. But, as I used to teach plant breeding students, I say, you can make two huge mistakes in your career and you're going to make one of them. You're going to release something before you're sure it's good, and you're going to take so long to release something, you're never going to release it. So you got to figure out which mistake you're going to make, because it's going to happen if you have a career. So, the failures are disappointing. I have to admit, my big concern would be a commercial grower, that went out and planted a lot of something. And then there's no chance it's going to work. And, they've invested hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. And that's one of the things. The private fruit breeding companies have a lot more control over their varieties because they work with bigger companies. And if they put out 2 or 3 or 5 or 20 acres and it fails, that's not going to be the end of the farm or something. So as a public breeder, always try to check for a lot of things that might go wrong and do all you can to communicate the shortcomings. I know I've given presentations and I walk away and I think, I'm not much of a promoter because I just talked about problems with salt. I should have got out there and said it's the best thing there ever was.
I can think of one, and it's not around anymore because I can think of a few that aren't doing so hot right now, but I don't want to name any names. But I don't know if anyone remembers the ketchup and fries plant. It was a tomato plant with potatoes on the bottom. And oh my God, isn't that a genius? I think it was a genius marketing idea, but I think it was just a little ahead of its time.
So that was my other question. Sorry, Natalie, but can consumers trust marketing? Or does that go back to our trailing that we talked about last week? I mean, it's, can they trust? I know we can trust your marketing.
It's a tough world we're living in right now with trust. Trust is a big issue across the board for everyone with everything they read or they see. Was this produced by AI? Is this person real? I think there's a lot of issues with trust right now. And so that's why I think people like Master Gardeners and Extension are so valuable, because it depends on where the information is coming from. Because do they trust an ad? No, I don't think that people trust ads much anymore, honestly. And so I think that people still will trust. And that's another reason why I think in-person events are starting to really ramp back up, because I think that people want to be in person, see a person talk who has credentials and hear them say it for themselves. So I think trust is a big issue.
Thank you.
And this has been an incredibly engaging Q&A. I've had a wonderful time, and I appreciate both of our speakers engaging with the questions, being so incredible and dynamic in your responses. This has been really fun. We're going to try to land this plane now for our Extension Master Gardener volunteers who are in the audience. And, my goal in quickly wrapping up today's presentation is to see if we could really find that connection point for our Extension Master Gardeners. Specifically looking at, how can we bridge research, consumer insight, and real world horticulture to be a part of the science that we've learned about today, that's really happening in order to make these plant releases come to market. So in the next couple of slides, I just wanted to share a couple of ideas of ways in which our community might contribute meaningfully to further support consumer horticulture and grow more gardeners. So we talked about this at our third webinar last week. Extension Master Gardeners may have opportunities locally to participate in trial gardens. For folks who maybe missed the third session, I just want to let you know, these are often run by universities, botanical gardens, and breeders. And Master Gardeners can collect traits on plants and provide feedback that can help researchers or breeders identify which varieties are garden proven. Feedback can also help breeders determine what aspects of plants that they want to commercialize. Here in the photo, I wanted to use photos of real-world experiences. This is a plant, Ceanothus maritimus valley violet. This was identified by an individual, a curator at the UC Davis Botanical Garden, the UC Davis Arboretum, I should say. And UC Master Gardener volunteers trialed this plant. They gave feedback on this incredible plant, and it ultimately went to market. So really great example of how we can have a role in consumer horticulture and in plant releases. We also can, and I mentioned this before, we can provide consumer insight. Extension Master Gardener volunteers represent enthusiastic and experienced home gardeners. So our opinions can really mirror consumer preferences. I think it's important that we be a part of these exciting research opportunities or breeding opportunities where we talk about what aspects of plants are really appealing to us. We have an opportunity to help breeders and marketers understand what traits may be influencing purchasing decisions. It's kind of a multi-pronged approach to understanding who the consumer horticulture community is. In the photo I have on the side here, this is a deficit irrigation plant trial at the University of California, Davis, where they go from barely any water to overwatering these things to look at plant performance. And Master Gardener volunteers come in and rate these plants. So really great example of different types of activities. Again, I'm going to give California-centric examples because that's where I am, but I would encourage all of our Extension Master Gardener volunteers to know what's available to you locally or regionally through your academic institution or through potential partnerships that you may have with propagators, breeders that are in your area. And of course, we have demonstration gardens and Master Gardener volunteers excelling in extension education. We can showcase plants and offer to showcase plants in our demonstration gardens and our demonstration plots. This can both provide important data, like in that previous slide, it can provide important data on the performance of those plants in different regions, but it can also help build awareness and public interest in upcoming varieties. I think we've got some great examples. The photo here is an example of a demonstration garden that UC Master Gardener volunteers have here in California, and they have a Master Gardener pick. They have a little sign on specific plants that individual Master Gardener volunteers want to highlight that plant. They do a little write-up on it, and then they put a QR code out. So people who are visiting the space can come and engage with the Master Gardener volunteer, even when they're not physically present, but they can engage with that Master Gardener volunteer and find out about that person's preference for the plant, why they like it, and what their experience is growing it. And then trend spotting. I think Extension Master Gardeners, we are tens of thousands of individuals strong, and we have an opportunity to be a part of the trend spotting conversations. We interact directly with the gardening community, and we can share insights into what's trending, whether it's native plants or edible landscapes or pollinator gardens. It's really an on-the-ground perspective that I think can be value added to our researchers, our breeders, and our marketers that are in our individual states. And here we have a Master Gardener volunteer who runs a podcast, and they're engaging live too with individuals who are there's a podcast and a radio show. People are calling into the radio show to ask specific gardening questions. We have an opportunity to share that information back with current and potential partners with our academic institutions in order to expand the conversation. I think along with that, we heard from Katie, we have an obligation to think about where we want to engage with people. So as we're trend spotting, also thinking about, are we engaging with people in the right spaces so that we're able to advertise the opportunity to come and speak with an Extension Master Gardener volunteer, maybe through a helpline, but are we communicating on Reddit that there's an opportunity to do that? How can we expand and think about our audience so that we can maximize the benefit? Now, in the next couple slides here, I just have photos of UC Master Gardener volunteers here in California, but these could be Master Gardener volunteers in any part of the state. I just want to mention that Master Gardener volunteers, we know that we are able to bridge science and the consumer, that's really the intention of the work that we do as Extension Master Gardener volunteers. We want to translate research into real-world gardening success. That's what we do every day, and we're a part of this consumer horticulture continuum as well. Master Gardener volunteers we can develop relationships. We can have authentic voices that build trust within our communities. Not only are we agents of our academic institutions, working with and through them in our volunteer capacity, but we're also trusted gardeners who are living in community with the clientele that we're serving. So we can be trusted voices in our community. And Master Gardener volunteers, last but not least, Master Gardener volunteers we're gardeners. We're out there. We have our own ideas about what we're looking for in our landscapes. That's important information that we can share back. Again, my goal in sharing these slides is really to encourage us to think about how we can utilize our role as Extension Master Gardener volunteers to have meaningful benefit for our consumer horticulture community. Now, I appreciate everyone who has been joining us for this 4-part webinar series. I hope that you have been able to make each session. If you have not, don't worry. These have been recorded. You'll also receive an email later in the week with a link to the recording to this session. Please share it with fellow Extension Master Gardeners. If you learned something over this 4-part series that really spoke to you, we hope that you will share that with your fellow Extension Master Gardener volunteers. We'd also love for you to fill out our evaluation so that we know what assets we want to create in the future that will support the consumer horticulture industry and also Extension Master Gardener volunteers. So please do fill out that evaluation for us. Now, this is the slide that I think everyone has been waiting for. Take a minute. You can scan this QR code. This is going to take you to the YouTube playlist where you can see all of the recorded webinars to date. Again, you're not going to find today's webinar there yet. That won't be available until later this week, but do take a minute to scan that QR code. This is available to you, and we would love for you to refer back to these or share them with your fellow Master Gardener volunteers. And I want to say, while you guys are scanning that, a huge thank you to our 2 incredible presenters today. Katie, John, this was engaging and exciting for myself, for my fellow niche colleagues, and for our audience. We really appreciate your time and you sharing your expertise with all of us. I also want to take a minute to thank the UGA Center for Urban Agriculture. They have made the hosting of these Zooms absolutely seamless, and we appreciate the contributions of all of the people behind the scenes who made this possible. Thank you all for coming today. We just really appreciate your participation, and we welcome you engaging with niche in the future. Take care, everyone.